Your cat has been trying to tell you something every single day, and it has nothing to do with meowing or rubbing against your legs. It is written in the condition of their fur, the way they pace the kitchen floor, the look in their eyes after they finish eating. And the answer to all of it might come down to one thing you place in their bowl each morning. What daily wet food really does to your cat is not just a nutrition story. It is a story about biology, instinct, behavior, and a bond that gets stronger when your cat finally feels the way nature always intended. Most cat owners make their feeding choices based on convenience, price, or habit. A bag of dry kibble is easy to store, simple to pour, and seems perfectly reasonable. After all, it says complete and balanced right on the package. But complete and balanced on a label does not always tell the full story of what is actually happening inside your cat's body day after day. And once you understand that story, everything changes. Let us start at the very beginning, with something so basic that most people never think twice about it. Water. Specifically, the water your cat is or is not getting each day. If you have ever watched your cat walk past their water bowl without a single glance, you probably chalked it up to cat behavior. Mysterious, stubborn, a little dramatic. But it is not stubbornness at all. It is pure, ancient instinct rooted in thousands of years of survival. Cats are descended from desert hunters. Their wild ancestors lived in dry, arid environments where standing water was rare and unreliable. So their bodies evolved a workaround. Instead of drinking water the way dogs or humans do, they absorbed almost all of their hydration directly from the animals they caught and consumed. A fresh mouse is roughly 70% water. A small bird, similar. Their prey was their water source, and their bodies adapted so efficiently to this system that their thirst drive naturally became very low. They simply did not need to feel thirsty in the way other animals do, because hydration arrived with every meal. Now bring that same cat into a modern home and fill their bowl with dry kibble. That kibble contains somewhere around 10% moisture, sometimes less. Their ancient biology has not changed, but their food source has changed completely. Their thirst drive remains suppressed, so they do not instinctively reach for the water bowl to compensate. They just keep going, day after day, in a state of low-level chronic dehydration that their body quietly struggles to manage. The kidneys bear the heaviest burden in this situation. They are responsible for filtering waste from the bloodstream and flushing it out through urine. When a cat is not getting enough water from food, the kidneys have to work with very little fluid to get that job done. The urine becomes highly concentrated, which puts constant stress on the urinary tract. Over time, this creates the perfect conditions for mineral crystals to form. Those crystals can become blockages. Urinary blockages are among the most common and most dangerous emergencies in cats, particularly in males, whose narrow urethras make them especially vulnerable. What looks like a feeding preference is actually a health risk playing out slowly and silently. When you switch to daily wet food, the first shift that happens is hydration. Wet food sits between 75 and 80% moisture content, which is remarkably close to the moisture level found in the natural prey a cat's body was designed to consume. The kidneys suddenly have far more fluid to work with. The urine becomes more dilute. The concentration of minerals drops. The risk of crystals forming decreases significantly. A study published in the Journal of Feline Medicine and Surgery found exactly this, that cats fed wet food consistently produce more urine with lower concentration, which is precisely what a healthy, well-functioning urinary system looks like. Your cat will not dramatically start drinking less water because of this change, and they may still visit the bowl occasionally. But what changes is that their body stops operating in a state of quiet deficit. For the first time, perhaps in their entire life, their cells, their organs, their entire system is receiving the hydration it was always supposed to have. And this shift is not just physical. It is the foundation upon which every other change in this story is built. Now let us talk about weight, because this is where so many cat owners feel confused and even a little guilty. Indoor cats gaining weight is an incredibly common problem, and most owners assume they are simply overfeeding. They start reducing portions. They feel bad watching their cat circle the bowl looking for more. They try different kibble brands, and the weight stays on anyway. What is actually happening has very little to do with quantity and almost everything to do with the composition of what is in the bowl. Cats are obligate carnivores. That phrase is important. It does not mean cats prefer meat or that meat is good for them. It means their entire digestive system, their organ structure, their metabolic pathways, all of it was built exclusively around processing animal protein and fat. They have almost no biological mechanisms for efficiently converting carbohydrates into usable energy. Their liver lacks certain enzymes that most other animals use to regulate carbohydrate metabolism. Their pancreas is not designed to handle large spikes in blood sugar. In the wild, a cat's diet contains almost zero carbohydrates. The prey they eat is protein, fat, water, and a tiny amount of plant material from the stomach contents of smaller animals. Dry kibble, even the premium varieties, typically contains somewhere between 25 and 50% carbohydrates. Some brands sit even higher than that. Those carbs serve a purpose for the manufacturer. They act as a binding agent that holds the kibble together during the high-heat extrusion process. But for your cat's body, most of that carbohydrate cannot be used the way it is intended. Instead, it gets stored as fat. So your cat is not gaining weight because they are lazy or because you are pouring too much into the bowl. They are gaining weight because their body is receiving a constant supply of something it has no efficient way to use. Wet food changes that equation completely. It is naturally high in animal protein, which is exactly what a cat's metabolism is built to run on. It is low in carbohydrates because it does not require the same manufacturing process as dry kibble. And the high moisture content means the volume of food is greater, which physically fills the stomach more than a small pile of dry pellets does. When the stomach stretches slightly, it sends fullness signals to the brain. When protein is digested, it triggers a strong satiety response that lasts. The result is that a cat eating wet food every day tends to feel genuinely, completely satisfied after each meal in a way that cats on dry kibble rarely do. Research from the Waltham Center for Pet Nutrition found that cats fed wet food diets were significantly more likely to maintain a lean body composition compared to those eating dry food. And this was true even when the cats were allowed to eat freely without portion restriction. The body simply responds differently. Your cat is not asking for more because they are greedy. They are asking for more because the food they are eating is not satisfying the biological signals that tell them a meal is complete. Switch the food, and the behavior often shifts within days. The next change that wet food brings is one that you will notice with your own eyes, and it tends to happen faster than most owners expect. The coat. The quality of a cat's fur is one of the most reliable visible indicators of what is happening inside their body. Not what you brushed today, not what shampoo you used, not even whether they groom regularly. The real condition of a cat's coat comes from what their body has available to build and maintain it at the cellular level. Skin and fur are made primarily from protein and fat. Specifically, animal-based proteins and the fatty acids that come from animal tissue. These are not just beneficial for coat health. They are essential. When a cat's diet does not provide enough high-quality animal protein, or when the protein it receives has been so heavily processed that its nutritional value has degraded, the body makes a decision. Prioritizes. Vital organs get the nutrients first. Immune function gets supported next. And things like coat quality, skin integrity, and hair growth get what is left over. Dry kibble goes through an intense manufacturing process. It is cooked at very high temperatures, which breaks down a significant portion of the amino acids and fatty acids before the food ever reaches your cat. Some manufacturers add nutrients back in afterward, but the bioavailability, meaning how efficiently your cat's body can actually absorb and use those nutrients, is often lower than in minimally processed wet food. The nutrients are listed on the label, but the label does not tell you how much of that actually reaches your cat's cells. Wet food, particularly high-quality varieties with real animal protein as the primary ingredient, delivers those building blocks in a form the body can use more readily. And once the body has enough protein and fat to work with, it stops rationing. The fur gets what it needs. Most owners who switch to daily wet food start noticing visible changes in their cat's coat within 2 to 4 weeks. The fur becomes softer to the touch. The shedding slows down noticeably. If the cat had a greasy, dull, or rough texture to their coat, that often begins to smooth out. Flaky skin, which is frequently a sign of nutritional deficiency, starts to resolve. Research published in the Journal of Nutritional Science supported this. finding that cats on high-protein, moisture-rich diets showed measurable improvements in both coat quality and skin health compared to cats eating dry alternatives. This is not a cosmetic detail. It is your cat's body communicating that it finally has what it needs. And for owners who have tried every brush, every supplement, every grooming trick without seeing results, this shift is genuinely surprising. The answer was not on the grooming shelf. It was in the food aisle. Now let us talk about behavior, because this is where daily wet food starts to reveal itself in the most personal and emotionally meaningful way. There is a particular kind of cat behavior that most owners have come to accept as just personality. The screaming when you approach the kitchen. The way they inhale the food like something is chasing them. The pawing at empty bowls. The 4 a.m. wake-up calls that leave you staring at the ceiling wondering what you did wrong. Most people assume this is just how their cat is. Some cats are more food-driven, they say. Some cats are just anxious around meals. But what if that behavior was never really about personality? What if it was about hunger? Not ordinary hunger, but a specific kind of biological hunger that dry kibble creates by design. Here is what is happening inside a cat that eats primarily dry food. The meal digests quickly within a few hours. The high carbohydrate content causes a brief energy spike followed by a drop. The low moisture means the stomach empties faster than it would with a more hydrated meal. And because the protein content is lower relative to carbs, the satiety signals that are supposed to tell the brain the meal is complete never fire strongly enough. The cat finishes eating, and within a short time, their body is already cycling back toward hunger. Not because they were not fed. Not because you gave them too little. Because the food itself did not send the right message to the brain. So they pace. They beg. They knock things off counters. They yell at you from the kitchen before their scheduled mealtime. They guard their bowl from other pets even when no one is near it. These are not personality quirks. These are survival behaviors triggered by a body that has been conditioned to expect the feeling of not being fully satisfied. When daily wet food becomes the norm, something shifts in how these cats relate to eating. The higher protein triggers a proper satiety response. The moisture adds physical volume to the meal, which activates the stretch receptors in the stomach that signal fullness. The cat eats, and then it does something remarkable. It walks away. Not because it has been trained to, not because the bowl is empty, but because its body has received the message it was waiting for. The meal is complete. A study published in the Journal of Veterinary Behavior found that cats fed high-protein diets showed significantly reduced food-seeking behavior and were less likely to display signs of frustration or agitation between meals. Mealtime, which used to be a source of anxiety and urgency, gradually becomes calm. The guarding behavior fades. The frantic eating slows. The 4 a.m. wake-ups become less frequent or stop entirely. And the emotional atmosphere of the household shifts in a way that is hard to fully put into words until you experience it. There is one additional layer to this behavioral change that is worth exploring, because it connects to something deeper about the nature of cats. In the wild, a cat does not just consume food, pursues it, stalks, it waits, it pounces, it catches. The entire process of obtaining a meal is woven into their psychology. Eating is the culmination of a mental and physical journey, not just the act of filling a stomach. When a cat eats from a bowl, that entire sequence is missing. The physical and mental engagement that was supposed to happen before the meal simply does not occur. For many cats, especially those with frantic eating habits or high anxiety around food, adding an element of engagement can make an already significant difference even more noticeable. Something as simple as a food puzzle, a feeder that requires the cat to nudge or paw at sections to release small portions of wet food, can activate those natural foraging instincts in a way that makes the meal feel complete on a deeper level. The cat works for the food, the hunt is mimicked, the brain engages, and the satisfaction at the end is richer. Paired with the already superior nutritional profile of wet food, this kind of engagement can transform a cat that was constantly anxious and unsatisfied into one that is calm, occupied, and genuinely content. That is not an exaggeration. That is biology working the way it was designed to. There is something quietly profound in this pattern when you step back and look at it. So much of what owners interpret as difficult behavior in their cats, The obsessive food focus, the restlessness, the constant demands, is not a character flaw. It is a communication. And once you hear what the body is actually trying to say, the response becomes clear. Now, as meaningful as everything covered so far is, there is one more piece to this story. It is the piece that most people skip past because wet food sounds so obviously positive that it is easy to assume the benefits are automatic. But there is a side to daily wet food that can quietly work against your cat if you are not paying attention to it. And understanding this is just as important as understanding all the benefits. Wet food does not behave like dry kibble once it is out of the can. Kibble is shelf-stable. You can pour it into a bowl, your cat can graze throughout the day, and the food sitting in that bowl 6 hours later is essentially the same as when you poured it. The low moisture content and processing methods make it resistant to rapid bacterial growth at room temperature. Wet food is the opposite. The moment wet food is exposed to air and room temperature, bacteria begin to multiply. This is not a slow or gradual process. Depending on how warm your home is, wet food can become unsafe within 1 to 2 hours of sitting out. And here is the challenge for many cat owners. Cats are often natural grazers. They prefer to eat a small amount, walk away, come back later, eat a little more. This is actually a healthy and instinctive eating pattern. But with wet food, that second visit can carry a real risk. The food may look exactly the same. It may even smell the same to you. But bacterial growth does not announce itself visually, and your cat's instincts were not designed to detect microbial contamination in food. They were designed to detect whether food was fresh prey or not. And wet food from a can does not trigger those same signals, even when it has become unsafe. The rule is simple, even if it requires a small adjustment in habit. Wet food should not be left out for more than 2 hours. If your cat has not finished it within that window, remove it. Do not leave it hoping they will come back and finish it. The risk is not worth it. Any portion of the can that you do not serve should be covered tightly and refrigerated immediately. Even refrigerated, wet food should be used within 48 hours for safety and palatability. These are not overly cautious suggestions. They are the conditions under which wet food remains the beneficial, nourishing option it is meant to be. There is one more nuance here that is easy to overlook. Serving wet food straight from the refrigerator is not ideal. Cold food is less aromatic, less appealing, and less similar to what a cat's instincts recognize as a real meal. A cat in the wild consuming fresh prey would be eating something close to body temperature. When wet food is chilled, it can feel wrong to a cat in a way they cannot articulate but absolutely act on. Some cats will refuse cold wet food entirely. Others will eat it reluctantly or less enthusiastically. A few seconds in the microwave or a small amount of warm water mixed in can bring the temperature to a more natural range. This tiny detail can make a noticeable difference in how readily your cat accepts their meal, especially during a transition period when they are still adjusting to wet food as their primary diet. None of this diminishes what wet food offers. Everything that was explored throughout the story, the hydration, the weight management, the coat transformation, the behavioral shifts, all of it remains true and significant. But the difference between wet food being a genuinely positive change for your cat and wet food creating new problems in unexpected ways comes down entirely to how you handle it after the can is opened. Pay attention to that, and you are giving your cat the best version of what daily wet food has to offer. Here is what is worth sitting with after everything covered here. Your cat cannot tell you they are perpetually thirsty. They cannot describe the feeling of never being quite full. They cannot show you a before and after photo of their coat or explain that they feel anxious every time they approach the bowl because something in their body is always bracing for not having enough. They experience all of that in silence, and what you see from the outside is behavior. Behavior that gets labeled as personality or quirks or just how cats are. But behavior is always communication. The frantic eating is communication. The dull coat is communication. The constant begging is communication. The restlessness at night is communication. And the message in all of it, when you understand the biology underneath it, is remarkably consistent. Something is missing. Daily wet food does not just add moisture to a meal. It restores something foundational. It gives a cat's body the conditions it was evolutionarily built to thrive in. The kidneys function with proper fluid support. The metabolism receives the protein it can actually use. The skin and fur are supplied with the building blocks they need. The brain receives the satiety signals it was designed to respond to. And slowly, quietly, a cat that was always operating just slightly below what it needed begins to function the way nature always intended. Watch your cat after a few weeks of daily wet food. Not just whether they eat it, but how they behave after. Whether they walk away calmly or circle the bowl. Whether the fur under your hand feels softer than it used to. Whether the 4 a.m. yelling has faded into something quieter. Whether mealtime feels different for both of you. Because that change, subtle as it sometimes is your cat's way of finally saying something they could never put into words. That they feel better. That they are satisfied. That whatever was missing has been found.